Oh my God.
The sun was dying over the desert when old man Jacob saw the colt. He was riding back to his ranch after a long day of nothing, which was most of his days now. His horse was tired. His bones hurt. His heart was even more tired than his bones. Jacob had learned, over many years, not to expect good things anymore. Life had taken almost everything from him. A dead wife, a son who never wrote letters, a ranch that was falling apart, dreams that turned to dust. So when he saw the small shape lying near the dried riverbed, he almost rode past it. But something made him stop. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be dying in a place where nobody cared. He climbed down slowly from his horse, his old knees making sounds like breaking branches. The ground was hot and hard beneath his boots. The colt was lying on its side in the dirt. Its breathing was so shallow that Jacob had to look carefully to see if it was alive at all. The animal's legs were impossibly thin like sticks wrapped in brown skin. Its ribs showed through like a skeleton trying to break free. The colt's eyes were half closed, and there was no fight left in them. "Oh boy," Jacob whispered. "Oh, you poor thing." He knelt down beside the colt, and his knees screamed in protest. The animal did not move. It did not try to run. It did not even seem to see Jacob. It was just lying there, waiting to die. And maybe it had been waiting for a long time. Jacob looked around the empty valley. There were no other ranches nearby. No other people. Just the wind and the heat and the dust. Somewhere, this colt's mother had probably died. Or maybe the mother was still alive and had abandoned this weak baby because she knew it would not survive. In the wild, only the strong survived. The weak ones were left behind. He lifted the colt gently. The animal weighed almost nothing. Its bones felt like bird bones, hollow and fragile. Jacob carried him to his horse and somehow managed to tie the colt across the saddle. Then he walked home slowly, leading his horse by the reins, not trusting it to carry both him and the dying animal. It took 3 hours to reach the ranch. The ranch was small and old, with a barn that needed repairs and a house that needed everything. But Jacob had nowhere else to go, and the land was paid for, so he stayed. He built a special place in the barn for the colt, a soft bed of hay and clean straw. He brought water in a bucket and tried to get the animal to drink. For 3 days, Jacob thought the colt would die. The animal did not eat. It barely drank. It just lay in the hay, breathing very slowly, like each breath was the last one it would ever take. Jacob sat with him for hours, talking to him in a low voice about nothing important. He talked about the weather. He talked about the barn. He talked about his wife, who had been kind and beautiful and had left him alone in this world. "You don't have to try so hard," Jacob told the colt. "It's okay if you want to stop. Nobody will blame you." But on the 4th day, something changed. The colt's eyes opened all the way. Not bright eyes, still weak and tired, but open. Jacob brought more water, and this time the colt drank. Only a little, but it was something. It was hope in the shape of water. Word traveled fast in the valley. By the next week, other ranchers knew that old Jacob had brought home a dying colt. They came to the ranch to see, and they all said the same thing. "That animal is worthless, Jacob. He's too weak. He'll never be strong enough to ride. You're wasting your time and your money. Just put him down." That's the kind thing to do. Jacob listened to all of this without saying anything. He was very good at silence. After his wife died, he had learned that silence was safer than words. Words could hurt. Silence just sat there, quiet and true. But he did not put the colt down. Instead, Jacob made the barn his second home. Every morning, before the sun came up, he walked to the barn and checked on the colt. He brought fresh water and clean hay. He brushed the colt's coat with an old brush, very gently, talking to him in the quiet darkness. "You're going to be okay," he told the colt. "I know everybody thinks you won't make it, but I see something in you. I see something that won't give up." Weeks passed. The colt got stronger very slowly. His legs stopped shaking. His eyes became brighter. He started to stand up for a few minutes at a time, then for longer. Then he could walk across the barn without falling. 3 months after Jacob found him, the colt could walk outside. Jacob named him Storm, though there was nothing fierce about the small, thin horse. But Jacob liked the idea. He liked imagining that this weak animal might become something strong someday. Or maybe that was just something he told himself. Maybe he was really just hoping that broken things could heal. Maybe he was hoping that he could heal too. Every day, Jacob and Storm spent time together. The rancher would sit in the barn, and Storm would stand next to him. Sometimes Jacob would put his hand on the colt's neck and feel the warm skin underneath. Sometimes he would just sit there, and they would be quiet together. It was the kind of quiet that did not feel lonely. The other ranchers stopped coming by. They had their own problems, but Jacob did not care. He had found something precious, a purpose. Every day when he woke up, he had a reason to get out of bed. He had to feed Storm. He had to take care of him. He had to believe that this broken colt might become something beautiful. And for the first time since his wife died, Jacob felt like his heart was not completely dead inside his chest. He was not alone anymore.
6 months had passed since Jacob found Storm dying by the riverbed. The colt was no longer dying. He was no longer even sick. But he was still small. He was still the smallest horse anyone had ever seen. The other ranchers in the valley said he would never grow to full size. They said his bones were broken from birth, that nature had made a mistake with this animal, and that mistakes could not be fixed. Jacob did not listen to them anymore. Storm was strong now, strong in the way that mattered most. His coat was shiny and smooth, the color of dark chocolate. His legs were still thin, but they were hard and solid. His eyes were bright and full of life. When Jacob walked into the barn, Storm would lift his head and make a soft sound, not quite a neigh, but something like it. It was Storm's way of saying hello. It was Storm's way of saying, "I know you. I love you." One morning in spring, when the weather was warm and the desert was full of green, Jacob decided it was time. He stood in front of Storm in the barn and held up the saddle. It was an old saddle, worn from many years of use, but it was clean and it was strong. Storm's ears moved forward. He watched Jacob carefully, his eyes never leaving the man's hands. "This is going to feel strange, boy," Jacob said quietly. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Storm did not move. He did not run away. He did not try to escape or buck or show fear. He simply stood there, waiting. And that was the moment Jacob understood something very important. This horse already trusted him completely. Storm had decided, months ago in that dark barn, that Jacob would never hurt him. And nothing could change that trust now. Jacob lifted the saddle onto Storm's back slowly and carefully. The colt's muscles tightened, but he did not move. Jacob buckled the straps underneath Storm's belly, talking the whole time in a soft voice. "There you go, boy. Easy now. You're doing so good. So very good." When the saddle was on, Jacob stepped back and looked at Storm. The horse looked smaller under the saddle than he did without it. But there was something beautiful about it too, something about the way Storm stood tall and proud, as if he was proud to carry this saddle, proud to be useful to the man he loved. Jacob fitted the bridle next. He placed it gently over Storm's nose and ears, and the colt accepted it without fighting. Then Jacob led Storm outside into the morning light. The valley stretched out in front of them, green and gold and beautiful. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at. There was a wind coming from the mountains, cool and fresh. It was a perfect day to ride. Jacob mounted Storm carefully, putting his weight into the stirrups slowly, giving the colt time to feel the pressure and understand what was happening. Storm's legs stayed solid. The colt did not panic. He did not buck or rear or try to throw the man off. He simply stood there, accepting this new thing. "Okay, boy," Jacob whispered. "Let's go." He touched Storm's side gently with his heel, and the colt moved forward. Not fast, slow and careful, but he moved. They walked across the open ground, away from the ranch, toward the dusty hills beyond. Jacob could feel Storm's muscles working underneath him, steady and strong. The colt walked like he had been carrying a rider his whole life. They rode for an hour before Jacob felt Storm truly relax. The colt's ears stopped pointing forward with worry. His breathing became easy and calm. And then something wonderful happened. Storm moved from a walk into a smooth, beautiful trot. It was not fast, but it was perfect. Every movement was controlled. Every step was sure. Jacob laughed out loud. It was the first time he had laughed in so many years that his own voice sounded strange to him. "That's it, boy. Yes. You're perfect. You're so perfect." They rode every single day after that. Jacob would wake up before dawn, eat a quick breakfast of bread and coffee, and go to the barn. He would saddle Storm, and they would ride out into the desert. They rode through valleys where the rocks were red and gold. They rode past hidden water holes where wild rabbits came to drink. They rode up hills where you could see the entire world spreading out below you like a great sleeping animal. And something magical began to happen. Storm started to understand things without being told. If dark clouds were building in the distance, Storm would move them toward shelter before Jacob even realized it was going to rain. If they were riding near a place where dangerous animals lived, Storm would stop and refuse to go forward, his body tense with warning. If Jacob was tired or sad, Storm would walk slower, gentler, as if the horse knew his rider needed rest. The other ranchers noticed this too, and it troubled them. "How does that horse know things?" asked a man named Cooper who came to the ranch one day. "How does he know where to go before you tell him?" "I don't know," Jacob said simply. "Maybe he just cares." "Horses don't care," Cooper said. "Horses are animals. They don't think like people." But Jacob just smiled and did not argue. He knew something that Cooper did not understand. He knew that love was a language that worked across the distance between human and animal. He knew that when you truly loved something, that love became a kind of communication. You could feel what it felt. It could feel what you felt. One afternoon, while riding in the hills, Jacob felt tears running down his face. He was thinking about his wife, about how long it had been since she died, about how lonely he had been before Storm came into his life. He did not try to hide his sadness. He just sat on Storm's back and let the tears fall. Storm slowed to a walk. The horse turned his head slightly, as if looking back at Jacob. And then, impossibly, Storm made that soft sound, the same sound he made in the barn when Jacob arrived. It was like Storm was saying, "I know you are sad. But you are not alone. I am here. I will always be here." Jacob reached forward and put his hand on Storm's neck, feeling the warmth and the life pulsing underneath. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for staying with me." That night, Jacob sat by the fire outside his house, looking up at the stars. He thought about how the weak colt had become the strongest thing in his life. Not strong in the way other people measured strength, not in size or speed or power, but strong in loyalty, strong in love, strong in the way that truly mattered. And Jacob made a promise, there under the stars, that he would never sell Storm. Never trade him. Never doubt him. This horse had saved his life when he did not even know it needed saving. And he would spend the rest of his days making sure Storm knew how much he was loved. The winter came early that year. By October, the air was already cold. By November, snow was falling in the mountains. By December, people in the valley were saying that it was going to be the worst winter anyone had seen in 30 years. The sky would turn gray for days at a time, and the wind would howl like an animal in pain. Ranchers prepared for months of being cut off from the rest of the world. Jacob prepared too. He fixed the barn roof. He gathered hay and stored it carefully. He bought supplies from the trading post: salt, medicine, grain, blankets, candles. But 1 week before Christmas, when the first real blizzard was moving in from the north, Jacob realized he had forgotten something important. Medicine. His old injury from a fall was acting up again, and he was running low on the medicine that made the pain go away. He also needed salt for the horses. And he had promised old Mrs. Wilson that he would bring her flour and sugar before the storm got too bad. Jacob stood in his kitchen, looking at the empty shelves, and made a decision. He would ride to town early the next morning, before the storm got worse. It was only 30 miles. In good weather, he could make the journey in less than a day. He would be back before dark. It seemed like a simple plan. That night, Jacob prepared everything. He cleaned his saddle. He checked the bridles. He made sure his water bottle was full. He packed extra blankets, even though he was only going to town and back. Something in his chest felt tight and worried, but he told himself it was just his old bones complaining about the cold. Before dawn, Jacob went to the barn to saddle Storm. The colt was waiting for him, as always. Storm's coat was thick now with winter fur, ready for the cold months ahead. But when Jacob approached with the saddle, he noticed something. Storm was restless. The horse moved back and forth in his stall, his ears pointed up, his nostrils wide and sniffing. "What's wrong, boy?" Jacob asked, running his hand down Storm's neck. "Are you scared of the storm?" Storm pushed his nose against Jacob's chest, harder than usual. It was almost like Storm was trying to tell him something. It was almost like Storm was trying to say, "Don't go. Please don't go." "I have to go, Storm," Jacob said quietly. "But I'll be back tonight. I promise." Jacob saddled the horse anyway. Storm did not resist, but his body was tense. His eyes were dark and worried. As Jacob led him out of the barn, the colt kept looking back at the ranch, as if trying to remember it, as if afraid he would never see it again. Other ranchers were at the trading post in town, and when they saw Jacob, they gathered around him like crows around dead meat. "You're crazy, Jacob," said a big man named Fletcher. "You're riding back in this? Look at those clouds. That storm is coming fast." "I'll be home before it arrives," Jacob said, but even as he said it, he was not sure it was true. The clouds were moving faster than he expected. The wind was already picking up. "Not on that weak little horse," Fletcher laughed. "That thing will never make it back in a storm. Why don't you stay in town tonight? Come back when the weather clears." Jacob looked at Storm standing in the snow, small and thin compared to the big ranch horses nearby. But he also saw something else. He saw a horse that had survived when he should have died. He saw a horse that had learned to run through impossible things just to stay by his side. "Storm can make it," Jacob said firmly. "He's stronger than he looks." Fletcher shook his head. "You're making a mistake, old man." But Jacob did not wait to hear more. He packed his supplies on Storm's back, the medicine, the salt, the flour and sugar for Mrs. Wilson, and extra blankets. Then he mounted the colt and turned toward home. The first hour of the ride was okay. The snow was falling, but not too hard. Jacob could see the road clearly. Storm walked steadily, his hooves finding solid ground even in the deepening snow. Jacob talked to him constantly, keeping the horse calm and focused. "It's okay, boy. We've done hard things before. This is just snow. We can handle snow." But then the wind changed. It came rushing down from the mountains like something alive and angry. It brought snow so thick that Jacob could barely see Storm's ears in front of him. The temperature dropped so fast that Jacob could feel the change in his bones. What had been falling snow became a blizzard, a wild, screaming, violent thing that wanted to tear the world apart. Jacob could not see the road anymore. He could not see anything except white. But Storm kept moving forward. The colt's pace slowed, but he did not stop. He did not panic. He pushed his nose through the wind and the snow, searching for a path, searching for home. "That's it, boy," Jacob said, leaning down close to Storm's neck, trying to make himself smaller, trying to give the wind less to grab. "You know the way. Just trust your heart." They rode through the white darkness for hours. Jacob's hands were so cold he could barely feel the reins. His face was numb. The snow was piling up on both of them, on Storm's back, on Jacob's shoulders, and Storm's mane. But the horse did not slow down. He did not give up. Then, finally, Jacob realized something terrible. They were lost. He had no idea where they were. The landmarks had disappeared in the snow. The road had become invisible. They could be heading toward home, or they could be heading toward the mountains, or they could be heading into empty desert where no one would ever find them. Jacob felt panic rising in his throat like water drowning him. This was it. This was how he would die, frozen solid on a small horse in a blizzard. But then Storm did something incredible. The colt stopped walking. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something that Jacob could not hear. Then Storm changed direction, not toward where Jacob thought home should be, but towards something else. Towards something only Storm could sense. Jacob wanted to fight it. He wanted to turn the horse back. But he was too cold, too tired, too lost. So he did the only thing he could do. He trusted Storm. He let the colt lead him into the screaming white darkness, not knowing if they were riding toward safety or toward death. And Storm walked on, one step after another, carrying the man he loved through the impossible cold, refusing to stop, refusing to fail, carrying something precious that he would not let the storm take away. The first night of the blizzard was the worst night of Jacob's life. He lost all sense of time and direction. There was only the white darkness, the screaming wind, and the cold, a cold so deep that it felt like it was freezing his thoughts inside his head. Jacob could not feel his toes anymore. He could not feel his fingers. He could only feel the warmth of Storm's body underneath him and the horse's neck in his frozen hands. Storm walked on and on. Jacob did not know how long they had been riding. An hour? 2 hours? The night seemed endless. But somewhere in the darkness, Jacob felt Storm turn slightly, and suddenly there was shelter. They had found a small canyon, tucked between rocks, where the wind did not blow quite so hard. Storm stopped walking, and Jacob realized the horse was trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion and cold. Jacob climbed down from the saddle slowly. Every movement hurt. His legs would barely hold him up. He found blankets in the pack he had brought, and wrapped them around himself. Then he wrapped more blankets around Storm. He stood close to the horse's body, using the colt's warmth to survive the night. "You did it, boy," Jacob whispered into Storm's ear. "You got us to shelter. You saved my life." Storm made that soft sound, the same sound he always made when Jacob came to the barn. Even here, in this frozen place, even exhausted and half dead with cold, Storm was still trying to comfort his human. They huddled together in that canyon all through the first night. Jacob did not sleep. He could not sleep. His body would not let him. Instead, he sat pressed against Storm's side, feeling the horse breathe, feeling the faint heartbeat under all that hair and skin. He talked to Storm constantly, because if he stopped talking, he would start thinking about dying, and he did not want to die. "We're going to make it," he told Storm over and over. "We're going to get home. I'm going to fix the fence that's broken. I'm going to make that barn bigger so you have more room. I'm going to live for 100 years just to take care of you." When the sun came up, if it was the sun, because it was invisible behind all the clouds, Jacob tried to get back in the saddle. But Storm would not move. The colt stood in the canyon, frozen in place, and for the first time since Jacob found him, Storm refused to go forward. "Come on, boy," Jacob said, pulling gently on the reins. "We have to keep going." But Storm would not move. He just stood there, his head down, his breathing shallow. Jacob realized what was happening. The colt was so exhausted that he could barely stand. The cold and the struggle were breaking him down. But Storm had gotten them to safety, and now he needed rest. Jacob sat down in the snow beside the horse and held Storm's head in his lap. "It's okay," he said. "We'll wait here. We'll rest." But as the day wore on, Jacob began to understand something terrible. The blizzard was not stopping. The snow was not getting lighter. If anything, it was getting worse. The wind was still screaming. The cold was still eating away at them. And Storm was growing weaker and weaker. By the afternoon, Jacob realized that they were not going to make it home. He had been lying to himself, and he had been lying to Storm. They were going to die here in this canyon. Jacob would freeze. And Storm would freeze after him, because the horse would not leave Jacob's body. The horse loved him too much. Jacob began to cry. Great, heavy tears that froze on his face almost as soon as they fell. He held Storm's head and cried for everything he had lost in his life, his wife, his son, his dreams. And now he was going to lose Storm too. He was going to lose the only good thing that had ever really loved him. I'm sorry, he whispered to the horse. I'm sorry I brought you into this. I'm sorry I couldn't save you the way you saved me. But something amazing happened then. As the sun began to set on that second day, Storm lifted his head. The horse's eyes, which had been half closed and dim, suddenly opened wide. Storm's ears pointed forward. His nose sniffed the air. It was as if something had changed, as if the horse could smell something that Jacob could not sense. Storm stood up. His legs were shaking. His body was covered in ice. His breathing was shallow and painful. But the colt stood up anyway. And then Storm took a step forward. Then another. And another. What is it, boy? Jacob asked, standing up on legs that felt like they belonged to a dead man. What do you smell? Storm kept walking, pushing out of the canyon, back into the blizzard. Jacob had no choice but to follow. He could not ride anymore. He was too weak, so he held on to Storm's mane and let the horse pull him forward. They moved through the white darkness for hours. Jacob did not understand where they were going or how Storm knew where to go. But he trusted. He put all of his faith into the horse's instincts, and he followed. Then, as if by a miracle, the blizzard began to ease. The snow was still falling, but not as hard. The wind was still blowing, but it was tired now, weakening. And slowly, shapes began to appear in the darkness. Shapes that Jacob recognized. The outline of rocks he knew. The shadow of a hill he had ridden past 1,000 times. They were getting close. They were close to home. But Storm was moving slower and slower. The horse's feet were dragging. His head was down. Jacob could feel that Storm was running on nothing but love now, pure love for Jacob, pure determination not to leave his human alone in the world. We're almost there, boy, Jacob said, tears freezing on his face. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit further. Storm took another step. And another. And another. People in the town later said they saw a horse moving through the blizzard alone, without a rider. They said the horse looked like a ghost, barely there, barely alive. They said the horse moved like something driven by pure will, pushing forward even when its legs could not carry it anymore. Some said they watched the horse stumble and almost fall, then struggle back to its feet and keep moving. Some said they heard the horse make sounds, desperate sounds, like it was calling out to something or someone. But nobody helped. Nobody went out into the blizzard to see what was happening. The storm was too dangerous. Nobody risked their own life for a strange horse moving alone through the snow. Only Storm knew the truth. Only the horse knew that he was not alone. Only Storm understood that the man he loved was still with him, frozen almost to death, barely conscious, but still alive, and that Storm would not let the snow take him. Storm would carry his human all the way home, or he would die trying. For 3 days and 3 nights, the blizzard raged. And through all of it Storm walked. One step after another. Through the cold. Through the hunger. Through the pain. Through everything that the storm tried to do to him. Because love is the strongest thing in the world. And love never stops. On the morning of the 4th day, the blizzard stopped. The wind died. The snow stopped falling. The clouds broke apart like they were made of paper, and sunlight came pouring down onto the frozen valley. It was so bright and so clear that it hurt to look at the white world. The ranchers began to dig out their houses and their barns. They cleared the snow from their doors. They checked on their animals. And that is when they saw it. A horse was standing in the middle of the road that led to Jacob's ranch. The horse was barely standing. Its coat was thick with ice and snow. Its legs were shaking so badly that it seemed impossible that it had not fallen. Its breathing was heavy and ragged. The horse looked like something that had already died but had not realized it yet. But the horse was still moving, still breathing, still alive. "Isn't that Jacob's horse?" asked a man named Thomas, squinting at the animal from a distance. "That little colt he brought home?" "It can't be," said another man. "That horse couldn't survive a day in that storm, let alone 3. But as they watched, something even more impossible happened. The horse turned away from the road. It moved forward slowly, stumbling, barely able to put one foot in front of the other. But it was moving with purpose. It was heading directly toward Jacob's ranch. Thomas and the other men followed at a distance, watching this ghost horse pull itself through the deep snow. They did not understand what they were seeing. They did not know that this horse had spent 3 days carrying a frozen man through a blizzard. They did not know that this horse had refused to let death win. When they reached Jacob's ranch, the horse finally stopped. It stood in front of the barn, and then, as if its legs would not hold it anymore, it collapsed into the snow. The men ran forward, thinking the horse was dead. But then they saw something that made their breath catch in their chests. There was a man on the ground beside the horse. It was Jacob. He was frozen almost solid. His skin was white like paper. His eyes were closed. Ice covered every part of his body. He looked like a statue carved out of ice, beautiful and terrible and completely lifeless. The men picked Jacob up carefully and carried him into the house. They built a huge fire. They wrapped him in every blanket they could find. They poured warm water over his frozen hands and feet. They held hot soup to his lips, trying to make him drink. For a long time, nothing happened. Jacob did not move. He did not breathe. He did not show any signs of life. But then, very slowly, his fingers twitched. His eyes moved behind his closed eyelids. A small sound came from his throat. It was the sound of someone fighting their way back from the edge of death, fighting to return to the world of the living. It took 3 days for Jacob to wake up completely. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he asked was about Storm. "My horse," he whispered, his voice so quiet that people had to lean in close to hear him. "Is he alive? Where is my horse?" "He's in the barn," Thomas said. "But Jacob, that horse is in bad shape. He's probably not going to." "I have to see him," Jacob said, trying to get up. They carried Jacob to the barn on a blanket, wrapped him in more blankets, and laid him where he could see Storm's stall. The colt was standing quietly, eating hay. His coat was still matted and frozen. His legs were bandaged. His eyes were tired and sad. But when Storm heard Jacob's voice, everything changed. The horse lifted his head. His ears pointed forward. He made that soft sound, the same sound he had made in the dark barn months ago, when Jacob first found him dying. Storm tried to move toward Jacob, but his legs would not obey. The horse had given everything to survive that blizzard. There was nothing left. "It's okay, boy," Jacob whispered. "Just rest now. We made it. We made it home." Jacob reached out his frozen hand, and Storm stretched his neck to touch the man's fingers with his nose. And in that moment, in the barn on the ranch, something sacred happened. The bond between that broken old man and that broken little colt became a legend, not yet, but it was becoming one. You could feel it in the air. Over the next weeks, both Jacob and Storm recovered slowly. Jacob's hands took a long time to heal. The cold had damaged something deep inside them. The doctors said he might never have full feeling again. But Jacob did not care. He could still hold Storm's reins. He could still touch the horse's neck. That was enough. Storm recovered faster than anyone expected. The colt was small, but he was made of something stronger than size. He was made of love and loyalty, and a refusal to give up. By spring, Storm was healthy again. His coat was shiny. His legs were strong. He was ready to ride. But something had changed. Nobody else was allowed to ride Storm anymore. Jacob would not let them. The horse belonged to him, and him alone. And Storm would not let anyone else saddle him. When other people came near, the colt would turn away and wait for Jacob. The story spread through the valley like wildfire. People talked about how a weak colt had carried a frozen man through a blizzard. They talked about how that horse had somehow found the way home through 3 days of complete darkness. They told stories about a horse that loved someone so much that it refused to let death take them away. Some stories grew bigger. Some people said Storm had superhuman powers. Some said the horse could talk to Jacob in their minds. Some said Storm was not just a horse but something magical, a spirit that had taken the shape of a horse to save a man's life. Jacob never told them the truth. He kept the story simple. "Storm is just a good horse," he would say. "That's all." But everyone knew it was more than that. Everyone could see it when they watched Jacob and Storm together. You could see it in the way the horse followed Jacob everywhere, to the barn, to the house, to the fields. You could see it in the way Storm's eyes would fill with worry if Jacob was ever out of sight for too long. Years passed. Jacob lived longer than anyone expected. He lived long enough to see his ranch become beautiful again. He lived long enough to have horses for trading and horses for riding. He lived long enough to know peace after a lifetime of sadness. And Storm lived by his side for all of it. When Jacob was an old man, older than he had ever thought he would be, he would sit by the fire in the evening, and Storm would stand next to him. People would come from other ranches just to see them together. They would stand quietly and watch, trying to understand how such a powerful bond could exist between a human and an animal. One day, a young boy asked Jacob the question that everyone wanted to ask. "Mr. Jacob, how did you make Storm love you so much?" Jacob looked at the boy for a long time. Then he looked at Storm, who was watching him with gentle eyes. And the old man smiled. "I didn't make him love me," Jacob said quietly. "Love is not something you make. Love is something you choose. I chose to believe in Storm when nobody else did. And Storm chose to believe in me. And once two souls choose each other like that, nothing in the world can break that bond. Not storms. Not cold. Not death itself." The boy did not fully understand. But he would remember those words for the rest of his life. And that is the story of the weakest colt who almost died on the trail. That is the story of what he dragged back to the poor rancher. Not things, but hope. Not objects, but proof that loyalty never dies. Not treasures, but something much more valuable, the knowledge that true love can survive anything. Even the impossible. Even the end of the world.